You're listening to
and such a short amount of time to do it in. We were really
a Mamamia podcast.
You're a celebrity, you're a sporting hero, an icon, and you get arrested for doing cocaine in the toilets at Randwick Racecourse with your wife. What happens next? How do you come back from that? Geoff Huegill, I want to call you Skippy and I don't even know why. Why are you even called Skippy and how do I know that?
It was a nickname that I picked up when I was swimming, and so it's stuck with me for quite some time. It's actually going to be really
From
funny.
Mamamia, you're listening to No
Filter,
Filter, a podcast where people tell their stories very candidly and aren't afraid to be vulnerable. My name's Mia Friedman. Geoff Huegill started swimming at the age of just 5. And by the time he was 21, he'd broken Olympic world record for butterfly at the Sydney Olympics. By the time he was 27, after 2 Olympics as a professional swimmer, he'd retired. Most people, when they retire, take up golf or something. But because Geoff was only 27, his post-retirement period involved parties, depression, and body image issues. And then 2 years later, Geoff decided he didn't want to be retired anymore.
Retired from sport, obviously had a lot of demons I had to deal with. I put on 50 kilos. I think that was another world record. And I personally, I didn't like the way that I went out in the sport, right? And that's probably that was my motivator to get back into it.
Geoff Huegill is a dad of 3 kids. He's been retired twice. He's been arrested. He's had a couple of massive public scandals. And he's a man who really knows how to make a comeback. Here's my conversation with Geoff Huegill. There are so few swimmers that I could even name anymore. Like I can name obviously some female swimmers, Ellie Cole and the Bronte sisters, all 3 of whom I've interviewed on this show and who I adore. But I couldn't name a single male swimmer except for your generation of male swimmers and perhaps the generation even before you like Kieran Perkins. I'm talking to you in the week that Shane Warne's died.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you, first of all, did you know him and how are you feeling, that idea of an iconic sportsman who was also famous, you know, as an Aussie legend?
Unfortunately, I didn't get the opportunity to spend any time with Shane, but did I know him? Of course. I mean, you hear all of the stories. He was probably Australia's biggest athlete, right? I mean, this is a guy that, regardless of whatever controversy he found himself in, he always came out smelling like roses. I actually reached out to him about 6 weeks ago, I think. There was an article that was on Fox Sports and it spoke about his demons and about, you know, how he basically learned to live with it. And one of the best things that I liked about that article and what he said is that, you know, where he's been able to feel so comfortable is because how he's behaved, he's been able to accept that that's just him. He's been able to just say, right, well, this is me. Like, this is the type of person I am and this is my personality. And I'm not trying to be something a little bit different. And I think that's something that really resonated not only just with me, but I think that the biggest challenge that a lot of, I guess, athletes or former athletes have is that transition into that period of life after, right?
Yeah.
Because it's always, I mean, this is what I'm defined as. And I think the world that we live in and even back in the day when I was a professional athlete, I mean, there's this pinnacle of what people are perceived to be or how you should behave because this is the way society believes that you need to behave.
Yeah.
So when it comes to a guy like Shane Warne, the thing that, you know, I respect the most, not only is his cricketing skills, is the fact that in that whole world, he was just able to be himself.
It's interesting that you say that because, you know, I think about incredible athletes and iconic athletes and people that if they walk down the street, everybody knows who they are. And I would say you were one of those as well. But what they're famous for is a particular, very specific physical talent. Like for Shane, it was spin bowling, right? For you, it was swimming, a certain stroke at a certain distance. And yet you're expected to somehow be a role model. When did that first start to weigh on you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, you know, I mean, it was part of the expectation of being in the sport. You know, I was very, very lucky. I had a very, very good swimming career. You know, I made my first Australian team at the age of 16 years of age. I broke my first world record at the age of 18. And so, you know, I came up through a world as well where obviously the main focus was the Sydney Olympics, right? So the generation and the era before me were guys like Kieran Perkins and Lisa Curry-Kenny, right? So that level of expectation and professionalism that was involved in the sport.
And celebrity.
Yeah, exactly right. It was something that you grew up with. And, you know, it was very easy to toe the line when you're part of that team and you do what you have to do. You know, I think after a while, though, one of the things that I noticed in that, as I said, coming through that first transition of life after when I first retired around 2004, I know around that early 2000, so after the Sydney Olympics, around that 2001, 2002, 2003, knowing that my motivation and my drive to be in the pool was nowhere near as strong as it was leading into 2000, that's when I started to have a lot of doubts or understanding of who I actually was as an individual. You know, one of the things that I guess it's because your life is always defined as being this professional athlete or this individual, and you've got a short little snippet in a window. I mean, that's the challenge of swimming as well, is there's only 2 major competitions per year. So it's not like rugby league or AFL or rugby union where you're on TV for 26 weeks of the year. So people get to understand your character and your personality a little bit different. You've got a small little window to shine, to be a little bit different. And then obviously the next game is on, or the next sport or something else that comes along. You know, to tie it back into the question that you asked a little bit earlier about the challenge with understanding the male athletes in today's world, you know, I've always say to people that 2000 era, in my opinion, is the best era that we'll ever see in life, you know, and that I'll ever see with Sydney. And a lot of, even though I'm a Queenslander, I grew up in Queensland, my heart and my love for the city of Sydney always, and I still get goosebumps when I think about it today, will always be in that 2000 era, right? And the way I sort of explain it to people is pre-9/11, right? So terrorism was full on, but it wasn't as in your face as after 9/11. It was pre-GFC, so corporate dollars just went out the door. No one had to write a receipt. It was pre-high-speed internet, so the only place you would watch sport would be at a venue, at home, or at a pub. And then it was pre-social media, so you could run an absolute muck and know your career wouldn't be over in 2 minutes, right? So it was just a totally different era altogether. And obviously leading into 2000, it was the end of, or the start of the millennium, or the start of the end of one millennium into the next, right? So it was just that whole hype and atmosphere and buzz. Yeah, it was just a totally different era altogether, right? So
you guys were rock stars, weren't you? You were rock stars.
And also, too, I think it helped because swimming was actually on in prime time, right? So, you know, it was on free to wear. It was on at 7 o'clock at night, Monday to Saturday. You know, we were lucky there was a lot of competitions in Japan or in Australia leading into that 2000 era. So, you know, Japan is on exactly the same timeline as Australia. So the way that they did it was quite amazing. It was, as I said, it's a moment in time that unfortunately we'll never get back. And, you know, especially now that everyone carries their phones and has devices, it's, you know, the challenge that we all have is to be able to, one, get eyeballs and for content and be able to hold on to that content or hold on to those individuals for a whole series, right? So, yeah, I can understand how much tougher it is for the kids of today. And also, too, let's face it, I mean, budgets are a little bit smaller and there's a lot more people that you've got to spread it out with. So, yeah, different world altogether.
You talked about motivation a minute ago. What on earth is the motivation? I mean, you swam, you know, between the ages of when you started at sort of 10 or 11 and 25 when you, I think, retired for the first time.
Yeah.
You'd swum like 30,000 kilometres. So like basically to London and back again you'd swum.
That's correct.
Chasing that same black line. What is the motivation? Is it the idea of getting on a podium? Is it the money and the sponsorship? And I don't say that to be a smart ass. Like,
no.
What is it? Like, what keeps you swimming?
Yeah, look, it's a few different things. I think, well, the biggest one is I wanted to win an Olympic gold medal. I wanted to be an Olympian. That dream started at the age of 5. I remember watching John O'Sieben win gold at the 1984 Olympics. And, you know, I remember just thinking to myself, look, that's all I've wanted to do. I just want to go to an Olympics. I love swimming. I loved the mean machine. I loved everything that was involved in the Australian Olympics and everything like that. And, you know, I moved to Brisbane when I was 11. I had an opportunity to swim with a coach there and a squad. And then not long after that, Sydney won the bid for the Olympics, and my drive and my motivation was to want to swim for Australia and go from there. And I sort of explained to a lot of people, and I talk about it, having that opportunity to be in that squad, it was pretty much an environment that just produced, it was success bred success, right? So I might have been like the youngest kid in the senior squad at 11 or 12 years of age, but the guys that were leading the lanes or on the other side of the pool were other people that were already Olympians, or they'd gone to Commonwealth Games, or they'd been to World Championships. So that pathway from junior development to elite international competition was in the same pool every single day, 48, 49 weeks of the year. So success bred success. And from there, it was about following the stepping stones. It was doing the local meets in Brisbane, and then the state championships. And then when we got old enough, it was to go to national championships. So I went to my first age nationals at the age of 13. And then at age nationals, you race kids your own year all the way until you get to open nationals, right? But then by the time you get to 16 or 17, you're already transitioning to racing men that are 23, 24, 25. So it was about following that pathway. And then from there, I mean, this is the other thing that, for any of the kids or the parents that have got kids that are swimming as well, I mean, I might have broken my first world record at 18 years of age, but the reality is I didn't win my first medal at age nationals until I was 16, and I didn't win my first gold medal at age nationals until I was 17. So even though I started swimming at a very young age at those competitions, the major focus was the longer term goal, which was Sydney Olympics and everything else like that, right? So it was about having to understand, rightio, well, this meets a stepping stone for the next one, and understand, what worked, what didn't work, what was my preparation like, and then resetting your goals and going for the next meet, and resetting it and going for the next meet. And, I guess that drive and that motivation was always, it came from a few things. One, the challenges I had as a young athlete. And I say challenges is because I didn't grow up in the ideal environment, I would say. I did and I didn't, right? Like, I always look at it that things happen in life for a reason. So, my parents separated when I was very young, and we lived with my father. So when I moved from Mackay, where I grew up, down to Brisbane to join this squad, I started living with another family at first. I was billeted just to make sure that I liked it before my father would move with my brother and relocate. And then after 6 months of being down in Brisbane, he unfortunately passed away with a heart attack. So I was stuck in a catch-22 as a 12-year-old kid. Was, do I go back to the country and live with my mum, which is up in Mackay? So do I leave Brisbane and head up North Queensland or Central Queensland and live again with my mum? Or do I make that call to want to follow my dreams and my destiny of wanting to swim for a living? And obviously I did SAS, and for me it was one of those good opportunities to have a chat with the DSs and to talk to them about some of my journey. And I recognise and realise that, and this is something I've always realised as well, is that things happen in life for a reason. I'm a big believer in that, right? If my parents split up, then I wouldn't be in the situation of living with my dad, and then I wouldn't be in the situation of having a chance to go to Brisbane. And then if my father didn't pass away, then I wouldn't have lived with my swimming coach. So then I was stuck in this environment where obviously, my whole world then just evolved around eating, living and breathing swimming, and I guess from there, it's, how I sort of got a lot of drive and motivation was because I wanted to do it, and I wanted to do something for myself.
If it's not too personal, I wanted to ask a little bit about your dad, because he died in his early 50s of a heart attack. You were 12 when he died. You found him, didn't you? He collapsed in the shower.
Yep.
There's no good time to lose your dad, but for a boy who's at the age of 12, who became the male role models in your life? Is that where coaches came in?
Yeah, that's where I was pretty lucky that, Ken Wood, my coach, he became that father figure. And that's what I say to you. That's where I'm a big believer that things happen in life for a reason.
Yeah.
I don't know what my life would have turned out to be had I, or if I went back to Mackay to live with my brother and my mum. I know my mum worked very, very hard. She held down 2 and 3 jobs for me to be able to swim and to put my brother through private school. The guy I actually have the most admiration for out of that whole journey is actually my brother. And that is because whilst I had the squad and I had swimming, while my mum was working, the fact that he didn't sway or he didn't get caught up in the wrong crowds. He finished his school, he got a trade, he got heavily involved in the surf club, so the surf club became his family. And we talk about all of that stuff quite a lot, and I think we've only really reflected on it over probably the last 18 months. I don't know if that's just we're both in our 40s now, and you do start to realise, okay, well, life is pretty fragile and you've been through some highs and lows. We've both got new partners and we both have 2 new little boys each, right? So I've got a nephew. My brother's got another son that's about 18 months to 2 years older than my son, Rafe. So I know that the 2 of them are going to grow up and we're going to have some boys' adventures and do all that sort of stuff, which will be pretty exciting. So that's, I think the biggest growth that I've had throughout my life has been, in particular, not only just coming to Singapore, as I said, I've been here now for the last 4 years, but meeting Roxy, having another son, having the opportunity to be able to have another family, and with the way that everything's sort of come together, it's, once you get to your mid-40s, you do start to reflect on, okay, well, where am I at personally? What are the things I need to change? And most importantly, what do I want now for my life moving forward, right? And I think, they're the big things that have really sort of been keeping me awake at night, right?
It's interesting at that same age that you are now, where your sporting career is behind you and it's like you have to start a whole other life.
Yeah, and look, I think for me it happened, the sporting part, I thought I was prepared again for that second transition into life after. I retired 10 years ago, again, from my second career. So I was very lucky to have a second bite of the apple. I transitioned into a few different things. I made sure this time when I retired, I had things ready to go. So Commonwealth Bank was one of my sponsors. So the exciting thing was I got to experience a bit of corporate world. So I went in and did a executive managers program internship throughout the bank and got to be exposed to all parts of the bank, from global markets to business and private banking. And that was pretty good. I learned a lot in there. That was great. I did a little bit of stuff with the media, and that was good. I enjoyed that. I did some work with Foxtel and Sky News. But I think the biggest thing that, when I sort of look back at it, it was a challenging time. I think the second time around, I think, I got married, I had 2 beautiful little girls. And I think, when I reflect back on a lot of that sort of stuff, also it was a beautiful time in my life as well. To go through that journey and to experience all those things, it was also pretty tough. Like, it was tough because no one actually explains to you how tough it is to have kids, right? Like, to have one, and you have to laugh about this stuff, right? Because you can't substitute experience. But, it's like, remember you used to sit back and you used to think, oh, look, you get together with your partner. It's like, oh, let's have some responsibility now. Let's get a dog. Right?
Let's buy a plant.
This is dog. Yeah, this is pretty cool. This is good, but you forget you leave it at home for 6 hours a day or whatever, right?
We're nailing this. We're ready to have kids.
Oh, yeah. And then it's like, next thing it's like, oh, yeah, we're ready to have kids. Yeah, let's have a child. This would be pretty good. Yeah. We've got the swing of this, and then it's just like, what was that, right? And
what shocked you most about it?
How much time I used to waste. That's probably the biggest thing, how much time I used to waste. That was the biggest shock about having kids the first time. And, obviously there's no off switch, right? That's the other part as well. So you're constantly on. There's no other way about it. And, and then just when you start to get the hang of things, right, then boom, something else hits, or you get a little bit of colic or a little bit of reflux, or just all of those little things you go through, right? And then once you get the hang of it, it's like, yeah, maybe it's time to have another one now, right? I think, whilst it's so beautiful and it was one of the best things I've ever done, and I love my daughters completely. Yeah, it's just that whole new phase, right? And
how's it different the second time?
You forget a lot of it. You actually forget quite a lot of it, and it's just different. It's just totally different, right? Like, I think that's the other part as well. It's it's just different. I think one of the things that I really value and I love, though, and this is something that I'm very, very grateful for. So when we came back to Australia, I had an opportunity to come back, and because we were locked out because of the borders and COVID, it was like, right, well, if we're going back to Oz, if I'm shooting this, we're spending a good 5 months in Oz. And, my girls had met Roxy on FaceTime and online, but they hadn't obviously met face to face, right? So that was for me, it was very nervous. I can imagine how nervous it would have been for Roxy, right? And, but once we got down to Tasmania, I mean, the thing, and this is what I'm so happy for, my girls absolutely love Roxy. My ex-wife, Sarah, and Roxy get along like a house on fire, and they love their little brother, right? And it's something that I'm very lucky for. And I think, this is something where I really look to Michael and Lindy, Michael Klim, and because to me, they are amazing role models in terms of being able to create that blended family environment. And, I laughed with Michael about that sort of stuff. And I get to catch up with him again in a couple of weeks. He's coming from Bali over to Singapore. And yeah, I think it's one of those things you don't actually realize how important it is. But, knowing that my girls have got, a baby brother, and they will spend a lot of time with their baby brother, knowing for Rafe that he's got two older sisters that will obviously, I don't know, what do you say? They're going to love him and endless love and support and be there for him and do all that sort of stuff. And, and to know that Sarah and Roxy, I mean, they don't clash. They do they're in totally different things. They do totally different businesses. They have totally different interests, and there's no competition between the two of them. It's, I'm very lucky that environment is what it is.
For people listening going, I've just broken up with my partner, things are a little bit tense. I can't imagine us all getting on famously.
Yeah.
I imagine it wasn't easy at first.
Oh, no.
Was it?
No, it certainly wasn't. Well, look, it's not as rosy as I say it is. It certainly isn't as rosy as I say it is. I mean, we have conflicts and you have challenges. That's normal. I think but it's all about balancing all of that sort of stuff out. I think, and that's the joy of life. And I guess that's some of the joy of parenthood and, adulting, right? Like you've got to find a way to work it out. But I think it can always be tougher. There's no doubt about that. I mean, we're lucky at the fact that we've just got to get on with it. I mean, with the major decisions that I make in my life, it's for a reason, right? So, I think the big one or the hardest one was obviously separating and having to leave my kids. That's probably the biggest one. I think for me, obviously, we went through a lot of challenges back in 2014 when we got arrested at the races. That put a lot of immense pressure on us as a family and as a couple. And it was hard. It was hard because, I had businesses. I was transitioning out of that swimming. And then in the blink of an eye, all of a sudden I had to close those businesses because funding had dried up, right? So it was funding from sponsors or work or a whole range of bits and pieces. And, it was more of everything went from being proactive in my life, right? This is my goals and this is what I want to do and these are the things we want to achieve, to all of a sudden just going, hang on, we're in reactive mode now, right? We've got to hold on to this. We've got to hold on to whether it's assets. Most importantly, I've got to try and hold on to my family, right? I've got to try and make sure that my kids are safe and my ex-wife is safe and I'm safe and we're all safe as a family unit. And then from there, it was about making sure that we held on to all the other little bits and pieces, right? So it was about damage control and then trying to salvage or hold on to as much as possible. And then from there, it was just about riding out the storm, right? I think, what I'm very grateful for is we had a lot of positive support, as hard as it is to sort of explain that to people. We really did have a lot of positive support. We had a lot of friends that did support us. It took a lot of time to heal for me. And then obviously I guess we got to a stage where, it was like with all relationships, it's like, well, where are we at and what are we doing and what's the most important things that are important to us and then how do we do it? And I think, for me, there were some work opportunities that presented itself over in Singapore. So, I made the hard call.
You talk about things happening for a reason. Before I let it go, being arrested, doing coke in the bathrooms. What was the reason? What was the reason do you think that happened?
Yeah, I think, for me, it was a wake-up call that I needed to change my life and lifestyle. I mean, life is all about choices, right? Like some days we make some really good choices and we move forward, and then some days we make some poor choices and, it puts your life on hold for a few years. That was a big thing. It was right, well, where are we at with our life? What's important? As I said, it was that reactive mode. Okay, well, what's important? My family is really important. How do I keep that together? How do we work together as a unit? What do we need to do? And yeah, unfortunately, things didn't pan out the way I wanted it to. But the upside is that by growing and taking that leap of faith and stepping out of my comfort zone of being in Australia, I came to Singapore, and I laugh about it all the time. I came all the way to Singapore to meet a girl from Mossman, right? And get together with a girl from Mossman, right? Like, I mean, go figure. How does that work? But I wouldn't have had an opportunity to meet Roxy, and we wouldn't have an opportunity to have our own family again, and the girls wouldn't have an opportunity to be able to have a blended family, which I believe is just as even more important than being with a partner or being in a relationship and both being unhappy. Hi, this is Geoff Huegill, and you're listening to No Filter with Mia Friedman.
I want to shift gears for a minute. It's 2004. You've just finished at the Athens Olympics. You placed 8th overall. Where was your head at?
Oh, thank God that's over.
You didn't want to be there, did you?
When I went to Athens, and like, I'm ashamed to say this, it's one of the things that really hurts me. And it hurts me because it's not till I get older that I actually appreciate how much talent I actually had in the pool. One of the things when I reflect is a lot of things changed in swimming from that 2001, 2002 era. And what I should have done at that point of time was change coaches as well and change my environment. I was grateful that I made the team. I was grateful that I made the final, right, considering my whole preparation was poor. As I said, it's something I'm not very proud at. So to come away as a finalist, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's pretty good. Retired from sport, obviously had a lot of demons I had to deal with. My weight ballooned out. I put on 50 kilos. I think that was another world record throughout my career in the short space of time. Obviously tend to take things to the extreme, Mia. And so when I sort of showed my face again, I was a little bit obviously I was overweight, but then it was one of those things where it's like, okay, well, start taking care of your health again and start, dealing with all those little bits and pieces. So when I started taking care of my health and a lot of my weight started dropping off rapidly, because I was swimming, I was like, okay, well, I'm going to put a new plan into place, right? It was 2008, and I knew that, while I was swimming, I was like, right, okay, well, I'll probably want to give swimming a crack again, so we'll see how it goes.
But why? Why did you want to go back?
A little bit older, a little bit wiser, and I personally, I didn't like the way that I went out in the sport. Right. And that's probably that was my motivator to get back into it. Right.
You wanted a do-over.
Yeah. I wanted to end things on my terms, in a career that I was happy with and in performances that I was happy with. I wasn't happy with the way I swam in Athens. And that was, as I said, it was really bugging me and annoying me. And I think, I spoke, I don't know, I've sort of realized that like I am, and I'm happy to admit it, like I'm an emotional eater, right? Everyone has their vices. Some people it's booze, it's food, it's gambling, it's shopping, it's recreational, it's medicinal. For me, it's when the penny drops, when your father has a heart attack at 55 years of age and you're tipping the scales at 138 kilos, you sort of realise that you're burning the candle at both ends pretty quick. I mean, the only thing that sort of saved me is I'm not a smoker. Then you sort of realise, all right, well, I need to start bringing things in and just sort of taking care of myself, and it's just not overindulging, right? That's probably the biggest thing. As I started putting a plan together, a bit of a 2-year plan. This is what I want to do. And then I found out that the coach from Perth, Grant Stolwinder, was going to move to Sydney after the 2008 Olympics. And he was creating this elite squad full of just sprinters, right? So 50, 100-metre swimmers, which is me. Found out Stolly was moving to Sydney, all right? And then he was living in Surrey Hills. And at the time, I had an office in Surrey Hills as well. I was driving down Crown Street, and then all of a sudden I saw Stolly walking his dogs. I was like, stop the car, Stolly. What are you doing? We started having this conversation, and it's like, and lo and behold, hey, do you want to have a beer? Right? So,
of course.
And then I said to him, look, like I want to swim again. And he goes, what? And I said, yeah, I've put a plan together. I'd love to swim again at the 2010 Commonwealth Games. So it was like 2.5 years. And we both had a chuckle, and he goes, no, serious. What do you want to do? And I said, I want to swim again at the 2010 Commonwealth Games. So he basically said to me, okay, well, look, I'd love to. And I explained to him the reasons of why I would want to do it. I want to get in. I wasn't happy about the way my career ended. And then I also said that, and one of the main things that was important to me, I wanted to take on a mentoring role, right? So to work with the athletes that were in the squad, to be able to get them to look at that life after sport balance, make sure that you've got something lined up. You've got to have that earn or learn mentality, right? So if you're not earning $1, you've got to be furthering your study and your career. But then also get them to look at the sport from a different light as well, right? So when you travel and you race and, the overcoming adversity and understanding about the longer term goals and just basically taking all the things I learned from sport and just sharing it with these younger guys. And he said, look, that sounds amazing. I'd love to have you part of the squad. So I got to end my swimming career. The faster times I swam in Delhi than I did back in Sydney. Finished the world rankings at number 2 back in 2010. I went on to a world champs in 2011. I got a silver and a bronze there, which is amazing. And then, had that chance to go through to 2012. So, I guess when I look back at that period, they're the lessons that I learned through that period of life.
Just finally, I just wanted to ask you something else about Warnie. He posted that photo just a couple of weeks ago, a photo of him when he was younger, and he said something like the shredding has begun. And he has famously, all of his mates have come out and said he was always, there was only 2 speeds. He was either eating everything, buttered buns with lasagna inside, or he was on these liquid diets. It's interesting the sort of very overt obsession with how he looked that usually you think about for women. But I was wondering, Shane Warne was famous for loving the ladies. You've been a Clio eligible Bachelor of the Year. Is there always that sense of that's where you've got to get back to, that idea of being ripped and how important it is and what that has to do with your self-esteem?
Oh, look, Mia, that's why my nose is flat, right? It's from kissing myself in the mirror. just jokes. Look, I think there's definitely a lot more pressure on men these days than there used to be.
Yeah, I thought that was so interesting. And a man in his 50s, it's like you're absolutely world famous. You're famous not for what you look like in terms of Shane Warne and in terms of you.
Yeah.
And yet still feel like you've got to have your ripped six-pack.
Well, our training was totally different. So I can't speak on behalf of Shane. I recognise where he's coming from. I do feel conscious about all of that sort of stuff. And especially because over the last couple of weeks I've been doing SAS, right? The thing I regret most about going into SAS is that I didn't do as much training as I wanted to do. And I found it really hard. I find it hard to motivate myself. So while I did a little bit of training here in Singapore, we were in lockdown still. So gyms were shut. So my ideal scenario would have been smash out some F45 sessions, do a lot of walking, do a lot of running, and prepare myself that way. We went through another lockdown, so gyms got shut. So the motivation to train yourself, that scheduled training program, straight out the window.
But this obsession with fitness, like I've seen a lot of guys do this in their 40s and 50s, when women perhaps go and have surgery and have Botox or fillers to try to wind back the clock. Yep. Men often go hardcore into fitness. Yep. Is that a thing that happens, and it's not just professional athletes, is this a pressure that men feel as they get older?
Well, I think as we discussed a little bit earlier as well, I think you realise that your time left on this earth is getting limited as the days go by. And so, you start to question a lot of things, the lifestyles you used to live, the diets you probably had. And then you realise too that obviously you're not as strong or as fast or as fit as you used to be. So it's either now or never, because and that's the time you do it. I think that the levels of extreme that I think Shane took it to was a little bit different, probably a little bit different to most.
You did SAS, my friend.
Yeah, but I loved every minute of it too. Like I love getting flogged. Like
Can't think of anything worse, personally.
The hardest part is like, because the DSs is just so ruthless and so straight to the point, and it's just like, you know what? If you're copying that sort of banter from them or that sort of that sort of comment, I mean, they're just going to tell it as it is, right? And you just have to suck it up and get on with it. For me, I was lucky because doing SAS actually kickstarted me and got me into that routine and motivation of wanting to really exercise again and go through the same thing, take care of my health. You know, I dropped 10 kilos on the show, and then we've sort of yo-yoed and dropped another 5 or so. But I think too, as we touched upon a little bit earlier, a big thing now is, I just turned 43, right? So I'm 43. So my little boy was born this year. So that basically means that at my 50th, he'll be 7. And then at my 60th, he'll be 17, right? My father obviously didn't make it to 60. So, these are the conversations that I have with my brother, and these are the things that we sit down and we talk about. It's like, wow, we really have to start taking care of our health now. You can't continue to behave in the same ways that we do, right? Like, as much as I love a beer and I love having a beer with mates and laughing and just having a good time, I can't do that on a regular basis. I can't do that almost every single day or every couple of days, right? So, yeah, it's, I think for most men as well, you do get to that point where it's like, because, as kids start to grow up and my girls are very active. I'm very lucky. Mila, my eldest daughter, Mila loves swimming. She absolutely loves it. And if she wants to go down that path, then, I'd love to talk shop with her. That's always going to be great. But I too want to be around. I mean, she's got a goal set now. She's 10 years of age. So same sort of thing with me, right? 2032, she's going to be 20 years of age when the Brisbane Olympics are on, right? I was 21 years of age when the Sydney Olympics were on, right? You don't get an opportunity to have a home Olympics in your backyard every single day, right? So I need to make sure that I'm around for that. I need to make sure that I'm around for Gigi when she gets older and she transitions through those delicate teenage years of life and into that next phase of university and whatever she wants to do as well. Like, it's, so for my motivation and my drive for wanting to take care of my health and to obviously get a bit fitter is to make sure I'm around for my kids ultimately. I mean, I know how hard it was to not have a father figure around, and I know how shit it was, right? Like, and it's all those little things I yearn for, right? Like, I wish my dad was alive so he saw me swim at the Olympics. I wish I could have my first beer with him when I turned 18. I wish I could go to the cricket with him. I wish I could do all of those little bits and pieces. And yeah, you don't, it's not until you don't have those little sentimental things that you actually realize how important they are and how grateful it would be if I could do those things with my son and with my 2 daughters in particular.
My friend, thank you so much. I've loved this conversation. It's been amazing.
Yeah.
You're a very bloody good coach. I feel all motivated myself now.
Thank you, Mia. No, it's been good. I mean, chew the fat all day, right? Like, it's pretty good.
So nice. You can watch Geoff on SAS Australia on Channel 7 and 7+. And if you want to hear a little bit more of our conversation, specifically about what it's like living in a different country from his 2 little girls, he was apart from them for almost 2 years during COVID. Head to the link in our show notes and you can hear a little bit more if you're a Mamamia subscriber. Our producer is Gia Moylan. The executive producer is Eliza Ratliff, and I'm Mia Friedman. Just by listening to this podcast, you have helped send 350 girls to school today. To help us educate more girls in disadvantaged communities all over the world, that is what we do here at Mamamia. You can become a paid subscriber by following the link in the episode description for unlimited access to all the best content for women, including some special bonus episodes of No Filter.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.